Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. Looks like people are getting signed in, so let's just give them another moment or so and we'll get things rolling. Really looking forward to our data-driven pricing webinar today with Stephen. So just give it a moment. Thanks. Okay, I guess we can get started with kind of the introductions and housekeeping items, and then hopefully everybody else can join us once we get through that. So first of all, thanks for everybody joining. I'm really excited to cover the agenda. So initially, just the recording will go ahead and be sent out after the webinar, and so obviously anyone that doesn't make it will get the copy of that too. Stephen, do you want to go ahead and cover the agenda briefly, and then we can do introductions and get rolling?
Great. You want to go to the next slide?
We're on the right slide. Are you seeing one?
I'm still seeing the cover slide.
Interesting. 1 second.
But while we get that straightened out, yeah, there we go. Okay. So thank you. Let me join Keboola and Colin in thanking everyone for joining us. This is going to be a very exciting year for pricing because there is a lot of change. Oops, there we go. Thank you. We're going to go through a lot of content today, so we are happy to follow up and discuss this in more detail with people later. But the key points that we want you to take away from today's webinar is that pricing should be based on the value you provide to a specific customer. That value can be quantified, so it's not a loosey-goosey concept, but we can actually quantify value. And that because you have more access to data than ever before, you can start to use that data to predict usage and value. And these two things are coming together to allow you to innovate on pricing models. So this year is really going to be the year of not just of data in pricing, but of data and prediction and the use of prediction to allow new innovations in pricing. So why don't we go on? So a little bit about me. I'm very, very passionate about the area of pricing. And the reason for that is that when I got involved in pricing about 15 years ago, under the guidance of Tom Nagel, who is one of the founders of strategic pricing, I realized that if I'd understood pricing earlier in my career, I would be a much wealthier guy. And part of my reason for working in the area of pricing is I want to make innovative new companies and innovative solutions successful in the market. And we can only do that if we share and develop expertise on pricing. I do this through investing in companies. I do this through advising in companies. I work with OpenView Labs in Boston and have recently founded a pricing design consultancy here in Vancouver called Ibbaka. And I look forward to getting all of your feedback and learning together as pricing enters this new transformative journey.
Thanks, Stephen. We're really excited to be partnering with you on this webinar and definitely looking forward to getting some more of your expertise here in a moment. So I'm Colin. I've been with Keboola for a couple of years and been in the B2B analytics space for several years. So Obviously, really excited to see another new application of analytics, in this case around data-driven pricing. So I'll hand it back to you, Stephen, and let you get going.
Okay. So the reason price is so important is because pricing is where everything comes together. It's what connects your marketing to your sales, and it's what connects your product and your service to how you create value. Now, you can disagree with your customer on lots of things. You can disagree on value propositions. You can disagree on what part of the market they think they're in. You don't need to agree with your customer on positioning. But at the end of the day, if you can't come to an agreement on price, they're not going to be your customer. So price and pricing is really the sharp end of the stick when it comes to marketing. It's where all of the insights around segmentation, positioning, value come to a point. Let's go on to the next slide. The thing to understand is that traditionally, we thought in terms of three basic pricing methods. There was cost plus pricing, which pricing experts like to look down on. But in fact, when the customer is in control of the deliverables and the customer defines the value, cost plus pricing is in many cases the best approach. There's market following pricing, where you set your price in relationship to another vendor or to a market established price. And this is good for non-differentiated offers, for commodities. I suspect, though, that very few people on this call are in a position where the customer is defining deliverables or where they have a true commodity and undifferentiated offer. So pricing experts for the past 2 decades have been preaching the value or the importance of value-based pricing. And value-based pricing is really the only way to successfully approach the pricing of highly differentiated offers. But what we're seeing now is the emergence of a new group of pricing methodologies and pricing models around performance-based pricing. And to the extent that you can use the new data tools and predictive analytics and machine learning to start predicting usage, predicting engagement, predicting value, we are going to see a move from value-based pricing as being the best practice to different forms of performance-based pricing being the best practice. Next slide, Colin.
Yeah.
Before, yeah. Go on, Colin.
All right, so just I'm going to throw out a quick poll. So what pricing model are you using? Cost plus, market following, value-based, or performance-based? So please, would love to get your feedback on that. So I'll just give you a quick moment, and then we'll let Stephen get back to it. Okay, got some good feedback coming in. So it looks like pretty even distribution so far, so that's pretty interesting. Looks like we got a lot of forward thinkers on the call. It's good to see. And all right, that seems good. So I'll close that and let's get back to it, Stephen.
Good. And can you share the results? Can you share the results, Colin, of the poll?
Yeah, absolutely. So 13% cost plus, 63% value-based, 25% performance-based, and nobody is market following.
Good. Well, I'm really glad to see that distribution. I know that some of the people on this call are in consulting, and many consulting companies, because the value is defined by the customer, use cost plus for good reason. Nobody is using market following pricing. We've got nobody selling commodities, which is also good, if true, and a large number of people using value-based pricing. So this is really excellent, and Tom Nagel and George Mueller and Tim Smith and all the value-based pricing people will be delighted to see this. Now let's go on to the presentation. So let's talk a little bit, though, about what value is, because there are a number of critical points that we need to take into account when we think about value, and all of these will translate to how we think about pricing data. So to begin with, value is customer specific. Now, in the real world, we often cannot monitor or test value for every individual customer, although that's changing. So with modern market segmentation approaches, we can actually specify value per segment. Value has both economic and emotional dimensions. And this is as true to B2B as it is anywhere else. The emotional dimensions of value are critically important in B2B, especially in the early stages of the customer journey. And finally, value is always relative to an alternative. And there's always an alternative. As an investor, I speak to many early stage companies and look at many early stage ideas, and people frequently tell me, well, there is no alternative to what we do. And unless you have come into a newly created universe, that's obviously false, because people have survived for thousands of years without your innovation. So value is specific to a customer, both economic and emotional, and it's always relative to an alternative. Next slide, please, Colin. So just quickly, let's talk a little bit about emotional value in pricing. And we've found that the best way to think through emotional value is to use Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, which you can see on the screen, the classic pyramid. And the higher you are selling up this pyramid, the greater the pricing power you have. So one of the things that as pricing experts and product experts and marketing experts that we need to start thinking about is what data can we collect either from social media or from our product itself or in our surveys and interviews that indicates emotional engagement. And historically, the company that has been really great at using self-actualization, at selling to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, is a company such as Apple, or in a different space, a brand such as Lululemon. And the higher you're selling into the hierarchy of human needs, the greater your pricing power is going to be. Next slide, please, Colin. So economic value is the other half of the equation, and it's the impact of your offer on your customer's business relative to the alternatives. And this can increasingly be quantified, especially if your customer is willing to work with you to share data. And I've found that if you build trust with your customer, especially the business buyer, not necessarily procurement, they are almost always willing to share the data with you that you need in order to understand the economic value you're creating. So the critical question that we have to ask is, are we behaving in a way that will build the trust that we need with customers so that they will share the data? The other part of this is that we have to trust our customers, because there will be cases where we are not creating as much value as we expected, and we have to trust that our customers will work with us to create that value. So in this new data-driven world, trust is becoming the foundation of success in pricing. This is very different from the world in the past. Now, the way that we calculate economic value in pricing is through this approach known as economic value estimation, or EVE. This term is actually under trademark by Deloitte, which acquired it when it acquired Monitor Group, which acquired it when it acquired the Strategic Pricing Group. But this really is a critical way of organizing and understanding data for pricing. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but suffice to say that for each of these value drivers, and we've got 4 positive value drivers here and 2 negative value drivers, one can develop equations and one can find data to feed those equations that actually helps you understand your differentiation value. And there are software companies such as Leverage Point that help you do this. Next slide, Colin. So once you understand what your differentiation value is, Your pricing power will help you determine how much of that you can meaningfully claim. You never want to try to claim all of your differentiation value, but in most cases, you'll probably want to claim 50% or less. I'm sure most of you know the famous statement by Warren Buffett that the best indication of a company that is investable is that it has pricing power. Well, this is what pricing power really means. It's your ability to claim differentiation value. And the best way to increase pricing power is to be able to better manage risk. Many of us are not aware of it, but there is actually a risk discount built into the price of almost all business-to-business software and other business-to-business products. And with better data, we can now better manage that risk, thereby increasing our pricing power. Next slide, Colin. So you put all this together, and if you understand your differentiation value, and you understand what your pricing power is, you can decide what kind of pricing strategy you want to follow. And there are really only three pricing strategies. There's a premium pricing strategy, sometimes referred to as skimming, where you claim as much of the differentiation value as your pricing power allows. There's a market following strategy, when you are a price taker, and the market is setting prices for you. And then in some cases, there's a penetration strategy where you are going to price relatively low given your differentiation value in order to build the market. Each of these strategies has its proper uses. The only issue is when companies get confused as to which strategy they're following. And different pricing models work better with each of the different strategies. Next slide, please, Colin. So to put these pieces together, you have to begin by understanding your differentiation value. And the only way to do this is to work closely with your customers to understand their business and the impact that you have on their business. You need to determine your pricing power, which will depend in no small part on both your emotional impact on your customer and how you manage risk for your customer, the risk of how much value they're going to get. And you should choose one pricing strategy. And smaller companies, anyone with less than probably $100 million in revenue, is almost certainly going to only want to have one pricing strategy. And if they try to implement multiple pricing strategies, there's a big chance that they will start to confuse the market. Next slide, please, Colin. So let's just think about how data used to be used in pricing. So once upon a time, and this is still true in many companies, the focus was on transactional data, the data collected from invoices, and where possible, off invoices, credits, and costs. And this was used to create what is called the pocket price waterfall, which you can see on the right. It's the sort of green and red staircase. This is still a useful tool, and it's a very useful way to look for price leaks and to understand problems in your sales and invoicing process. But it doesn't really tell you much about what your value is or your pricing strategy. And the same is true of scatter plots. It's important to do these scatter plots of where your pricing falls to look for inconsistencies and patterns, but they're not really going to give you the insight that you need. Now, the legacy or the classic pricing software systems use all of this data and sometimes a little bit of external data to try to inference, to make estimates of what the customer's willingness to pay is, and then make suggestions on pricing based on the estimate for willingness to pay. This is not the future of pricing, though. Next slide, Colin. So the future of pricing is going to be much more involved in prediction. We are going to want to be able to predict usage, so to develop measures of predictive engagement. So all of you who are in the software business or the Internet of Things business, I'm sure are collecting a lot of usage data. The usage data you should be collecting is the data that allows you to predict future engagement. You also want to be designing your software and the data models in your software in order to collect as much information as you can about value, both emotional value and economic value. And you want to be tracking this as it changes over time. So let's call this predictive value. And the reasons that you are going to want to start doing this are in aid of performance-based pricing. Next slide, Colin. So let's do another quick questionnaire on what data people are collecting and analyzing today.
Okay, so the poll is out. We'd love to hear from you. So what do you do? What do you analyze today? Transactional pricing data from invoicing, pipeline data from CRM, usage data, other data from clients' ERPs, or other external data that may impact the value customers get from your offer. And we got some good results coming in. So let me just give it a few more moments and I'll share those with you. Still getting some feedback. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close that and we will share the results. So it looked like we had 50% using transactional, 50% using pipeline data, 38% usage data, 38% other ERP, and then 38% external data. So a pretty even distribution and a lot of, obviously a lot of variety of data out there being used, which is good to see.
And Colin, are you able to see, are those 50% using transactional data and 50% using pipeline data, are those largely the same people, or is it hard to tell that?
I can't see that here, but I'll definitely dive into that after the webinar. Sorry about that.
Okay, nope, limitation to the tool.
Yeah.
It just shows why when one's looking at data, the nuances in the data are very important. I'm just writing a blog post now on why the shape of your data distributions matters so much in interpreting data. But let's go back to the presentation. Great. So I'd like to suggest that there are going to be 3 trends that are going to impact pricing. And this is basically B2B pricing I'm talking about here, and primarily the pricing of B2B software and industrial Internet of Things offers. So one thing that we are really seeing in the market is the pace of commoditization is accelerating. It's gotten faster every year for the last 3 years. And this is putting a lot of pressure on people who are responsible for pricing in organizations and on product strategy. And there is no reason to think that this pace of commoditization is going to slow down. Predictive analytics systems are getting better and better. The advances in machine learning and deep learning from places like the University of Toronto and New York University have really advanced the field in startling ways and have greatly and rapidly increased our ability to build predictive models. And as a result of this, performance pricing models will become more common. The main arguments against performance-based pricing have generally been around predictability. This is for both the buyer and the seller. Many large buyers do not like to buy or commit to unpredictable costs. It's too difficult for them to manage. So they push for a risk discount, get a lower price in order for a fixed cost into the future. And the sellers as well really value having predictable revenue. Predictable revenue is the name of a very successful approach to sales that was originated at Salesforce. But once you get predictive analytics in place and can start predicting value, predicting usage, and predicting engagement, you can start to address these 2 standard objections to performance-based pricing. And because with performance-based pricing, you are shifting the risk onto the seller, you will actually get higher price realization. So the link here goes to an article on OpenView, this blog that goes into these 3 trends in a little bit more detail for those who are interested. Colin? So as you develop your data models going forward, you're really going to want to integrate three things. Your value model, which is your predictive value, your usage model, which is the predictive engagement or predictive use, and you're going to want to use those to have a dynamic pricing model that is based on performance. So we don't have time in this webinar to go into the details of how you do this, but this is the vision that you should be designing to as you design the data in your solutions when you think about it from a pricing perspective. Colin? So predictive analytics is going to be so important because it is a powerful way to use your data. It reduces the risk for both buyer and seller, which leads to increased pricing power, and it enables performance-based pricing. Colin? When we skip through this slide, this is just a background slide, and I think we can go over to your slides, Colin.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, thanks so much, Stephen. And I did want to say that I will make sure the link to the article you mentioned goes out with the copy of the recording, because they probably can't click on it. I don't think GoToWebinar's that good. But yeah, so obviously we talked about a lot of different data, and being able to segment, predict, and innovate. And obviously, CRM, ERP, and all that's great, and it's great to see all of you using diverse data. But the one big challenge we've seen in all sorts of analytics projects is there's always another data source. So the aspirations can often be very frustrating to realize. Too many data, another data source to configure. And at the end of the day, a lot of the time spent for any data project is just bringing together your data sources and trying to get them to play nicely together, so you can actually focus on, uncovering some insights out of your data and actually, providing value. So really, at Keboola, our approach is to simplify the world of data by using proven approaches and one platform to have an environment to build your data projects on top of. That way you can focus on doing stuff with data, not configuring it. So in essence, Keboola is a platform that allows you to bring in data from any data source, be it Salesforce, SAP, any data your customer might have that you want to connect, and make that data nice and organized, and be able to consume that data in a BI tool, send data back into your CRM or your marketing automation tool to influence campaigns and things like that, or send data to your customer. So we're really all about sharing data and using data to make your business better. So just a quick look at the platform. We're not going to get too technical here, but it's really being able to bring in data from any of your cloud-based data sources, any transactional data, as well as again, any data your customer might have, and really using the existing skills of your data team, be that through SQL, Python, or R from your data engineers or data scientists, and then being able to provide those data pipes to your data analysts and your business users and your customers, so they can all get the data they need. And then, really for a project like this, right, the idea would be organize your data. Obviously, you guys are already using quite a bit right now. Being able to then, again, feed data into, for example, pre-built dashboards for your account management team with data around pricing, or, data feeds to Dropbox or Tableau for your data analyst, so they can do some digging around there. And really our focus being, again, realizing time to value sooner. That way you can focus on actually uncovering pricing insights and things like that, and not focused on managing a data environment. So if that's something that we could help you with, please let us know. We're happy to have a chat. Stephen, did you
Thank you,
want to?
Colin. Yeah, so again, this is just a follow-up slide for when we send out the webinar. But as you can see, the data demands on pricing experts and the pricing function and the product management function are going to go up exponentially this year. And you're going to want to bring a solution such as Keboola to these problems in order to really pull the data together so that you can build those value models, build those that predictive value model, that predictive usage model, and use those to inform your pricing strategy. So I think we have time for some questions, Colin.
Yeah, let's see. So yeah, please shoot some questions in the chat box right now. Let's see, where is it? I can't. There we go. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Let's just give a couple of moments for some questions, and then. Oh, sorry, Stephen. Is there anything as far as follow-ups?
Yeah, no. We look forward to having conversations with people about how they're using data and pricing, how they can use data to better inform their pricing strategies. And remember that pricing is really the most powerful lever you have to have an immediate impact on your business performance.
Okay, so one question would be, what do you typically see as the top one or two challenges people run into when they're trying to, I guess, either improve their current pricing model or change to a new pricing model?
So I think the big challenge that many people have is that they don't have a very, very specific grasp of the value that they are providing to their customers, and they haven't used an understanding of value to segment their market. So without a value-based market segmentation, it's very difficult to come up with a precise and powerful pricing strategy or pricing model. So the foundation of your work is a data-driven, value-based market segmentation. And unfortunately, very few companies have invested the time and effort to do this. And without this, it's sort of throwing darts at the dartboard with the blindfold on. So that, I think, is the biggest challenge that people face. The other question was, how do you go about transitioning from one pricing model to another? And of course, over the last 5 years and the coming 5 years, many companies have wanted to transition from a perpetual license to some form of subscription model. And the challenges here, I find, is that under a subscription model, clients or your customers expect a regular stream of innovation and a regular stream of value. And the old, dump a big piece of software on somebody's servers and go away and let them worry about it, that approach does not work. So you need to shift from customer support to customer success, and your customer success team needs to be deeply integrated with understanding the value and segmentation and pricing.
Thank you. One more. Can you talk a little bit more about data sharing with your customers and how that can help improve your pricing?
So this is actually critical. You have to be willing, your customers have to be willing to share data with you, and you have to be willing to share data back to your customers. And this has been a challenge for many organizations where there's a lack of trust. So how do you build trust? Well, the first thing you need to do is to have first-rate data security practices. So no one is going to trust you with their data if they are afraid of data leaks. So the first foundation of trust is really first-rate data security and data ownership and transparency about that. I'm sure most of us have signed on to a service without reading the terms and conditions of the service, but that practice is terrible. So companies need to get much more transparent about how they're going to use data, and that will allow their customers to share more data with them. The second thing is you need to show that you've got a commitment to really understanding your customers and improving their business. And if you go in and show that you've done your homework and thought hard about your customers and how you can improve their business, they are far more willing to share data with you if they know that the purpose of this is to get them more value. And then the final thing is that it's great to base prices on value and performance, but if your salespeople cannot communicate that, they're going to default to discounting. So sales teams need to be given the training and the tools that they need to actually discuss and negotiate and sell on value, because it is your salespeople that will be in many cases, will be the forward line in all of these discussions.
Okay, we got one more. How do you know if you're in the right pricing model?
I'm sorry. How do you know if you're in the right
pricing model or pricing?
That's a great question. There's not a short answer to it.
Well,
basically, your pricing model has to be able to track the value that you create for your customers without interfering with the value that you create for your customers. There's actually an Achilles heel or an embedded contradiction in a lot of value-based pricing work, which is if I price based on value and I capture more and more price as the customer gets more and more value, if I'm not careful, I can actually design a pricing model that discourages usage. So the art in designing good pricing models is to find the way to structure them to encourage effective use and effective value at the same time. So, and there's a real art in there. And the other thing too about designing pricing models is that they are if you've got a good segmentation, a good data-driven, value-based segmentation, they are very often going to be segment-specific. So you will not have the identical value pricing models for different segments, because different segments get value in the same way and they require different pricing models.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate it. Looks like that was all the questions for now. So I'll go ahead and send us home. But yeah, and I would say from my experience on the sales side of things, it's definitely kind of a twofold of one, selling internally to your sales team and helping educate them so they know what the pricing means, what the levers are, and like what that actually means for your customers, right? Because if they're not confident in where those numbers come from and what those numbers mean, that's going to show on the front lines. And the other part being make it, think about it in like not how are you selling always, but are you making it easy for your customer to buy in that they understand what that price is, right? But yeah, so I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. So as mentioned, the link to the recording will go out, and I'll also make sure a link to the post that Stephen mentioned will go out. We really appreciate everybody joining us today. And Stephen, I wanted to say thank you so much for really the great knowledge you shared with us. And we're hopefully looking forward to doing it again. Do you want to add anything else?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Colin, and thank you to the excellent crew at Keboola for the support and the ideas. And thank you, everyone, for spending your time with us this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Have a good day.